Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. I realized a day ago that these two stories, I think, are connected. I think Moses parting the Red Sea and Israel escaping from the Egyptians, I think that's a foreshadowing of Christ coming to the Mount of Olives and the mountain separating, allowing for an escape for the Jews from the city as they're being pursued by whoever that enemy is at the time. And I dug into it deeper, and I think there really is reason to believe that the story of Moses and Israel in the Red Sea is a foreshadowing of this event. And it's interesting because before this point, we had looked at the story of Jericho, which is when Israel was done wandering in the wilderness and they were ready to inherit and possess the land. And this is the first time in scripture that we see 7 trumpets. The next time we see 7 trumpets is in the book of Revelation, and it's related to the second coming. And then we see 2 more sets of 7 trumpets in Doctrine and Covenants 88, which is a big second coming section. So I'm not going to go through all the symbolism of the story of Jericho, but it fits really nicely with what's going to happen at the second coming. If Jericho represents the world and the Israelites inheriting it and it getting burnt to the ground, and you see what I mean? So I think there's something else going on here, and I want to show you some of the details that I found. Now, back in 2023, basically the first big event, the first disaster of that year that was really large, was this earthquake that took place in Turkey, and it also affected Syria. But it was so strong that there was this Mount of Olives, so to speak, in Turkey that cleaved in twain. As you can see right here, there's this large chasm that developed as a result of an earthquake. And on this hilltop or mountain or whatever you want to call it, there was an olive grove. You can actually see it in satellite imagery. Oh, sorry, let's look at this first. This is what it looks like. This is as of October 2024. And I think this is the chasm right here. So here's the Turkey chasm. And then if we go to Jerusalem, you can see the Mount of Olives. And you can see that the size of the quote unquote mountains are, I say quote unquote because I'm from Utah. The size of the mountains and the general appearance is pretty similar. And so I take this as a sign. I think it's a sign that we're going to be seeing this in Jerusalem soon. Let's look at the satellite imagery. If we go to Google Earth, this occurred relatively close to Israel. When we're looking at the entire world, it took place in a not too far away. So it's about from the Mount of Olives to where this chasm developed. It's about 492 kilometers, or in miles, it's only 306 miles. That's not very far. We can zoom in. I asked Google if it could give me the coordinates for the chasm, and here it is. So you can see the olive grove right here, split down the middle. And I think we're gonna see something very, very similar when Christ comes to the Mount of Olives. So what I want to do, I first want to read in the scriptures about Christ coming to the Mount of Olives, and then go through the story in Exodus of Moses parting the Red Sea and how there's so many similarities between the two events. So in Zechariah, we'll start in chapter 14. And his feet, now note this right here, his feet, because there's a parallel in the story of Moses and the Red Sea. And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives which is before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof toward the east and toward the west. Which I have another video idea based off of this by itself. So first, it cleaves toward the east and toward the west. And there shall be a very great valley, and half of the mountain shall move toward the north, and half of it toward the south. So it's kind of interesting. It like kind of opens up one way, but then it gets split another way, north and south. And ye, referring to the Jews at the time that this happens, and ye shall flee to the valley of the mountains. For the valley of the mountains shall stretch unto Azal. Yea, ye shall flee like as ye fled before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. And the Lord my God shall come in all the saints with thee. Notice, and it's like this throughout the Old Testament, that Lord is in all caps. Because whenever you have that, the original Hebrew had the name of Jehovah or Yahweh, which we know is Christ. So it's like, and Yahweh or Jehovah, my God, shall come in all the saints with thee. That's also important to note when we read about the Red Sea. And it shall come to pass in that day that the light shall not be clear nor dark, and it shall be one day which shall be known to the Lord, not day nor night, but it shall come to pass that that at evening time it shall be light. So we have something similar here going on as to what happened when Christ came the first time, and the Nephites experienced a day and a night and a day, and it seemed like it was one day. Verse 8, and it shall be in that day that living waters shall go out from Jerusalem, half of them toward the former sea, and half of them toward the hinder sea. In summer and in winter shall it be. So we end off with a nice rhyme right there. This is an interesting parallel. I'm just going to point it out right now, where you have a mountain, which is land, that gets divided, and then you have water that comes out. Whereas with the parting of the Red Sea, you have water that's separated, and then it produces, after it dries up, dry land that the Jews walk on. So already there's this kind of like inverse or opposite connection between the two stories. One with water being divided and then dry land appearing, one with land being divided and then water appearing. You understand what I mean? And then, now this is actually in the preceding verse, or the preceding chapter, in Zechariah 13, verse 6, and one shall say unto him, what are these wounds in thy hands? Then shall he answer, those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. And this is actually talked about in Doctrine and Covenants 45, verses 51 to 53. And then shall the Jews look upon me and say, what are these wounds in thy hands and in thy feet? Then shall they know that I am the Lord, for I will say unto them, these wounds are the wounds with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. I am he who was lifted up. I am Jesus that was crucified. I am the Son of God. And then shall they weep because of their iniquities. Then shall they lament because they persecuted their king. Okay, so let's compare what we just read to the story of Moses parting the Red Sea. And I'm going to read the whole chapter because there are just so many interesting details here and connections. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, that they turn and encamp before oh my gosh. Better cough first. Pihahiroth, between Migdal in the sea, over against Baal Zephon, before it shall ye encamp by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, they are entangled in the land, the wilderness hath shut them in. Now, really quick, what's interesting, I don't know the exact circumstances uh, that there will be when Israel is invaded and their enemies attack, but they may see a kind of advantage, maybe a geographic advantage when Israel gets attacked. Here, you have Pharaoh, looking at the situation and being like, "Oh, look, they're entangled. They're in a bad spot. They're closed in. They can't flee." Something like that. And maybe something similar is going to happen when Israel's invaded and you have the Battle of Armageddon and the siege of Jerusalem, right? Okay. Um, Continuing. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart that he shall follow after them, and I will be honored upon Pharaoh and upon all his host, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. And Lord is in all caps, so that the Egyptians may know that I am Yahweh, Jehovah. And they did so. Now think about this. That's what's going to happen at the second coming. Christ is going to, for his last two appearances, he's going to come to the Jews, and they're going to recognize him as Jehovah, the Messiah, Jesus Christ, and the world is going to recognize it. So I think that's what is being foreshadowed here. In those days, it was going to be Pharaoh and his army and the Egyptians pursuing Israel and trying to capture them and possibly destroy them. Okay, continuing. And it was told the king of Egypt that the people fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and of his servants was turned against the people. Oh yeah, let me just say about this part, the hardening of Pharaoh's heart. Look at the world today. There's always been animosity toward the Jews throughout history, but especially today, after this war broke out on October 7th of 2023, which, by the way, we just talked about the earthquake that happened in 2023, and that's when the war started later in the year. But since that time, you've had a lot of hearts hardened against the Jews, against Israel, like even more than they were before that point. Hearts have become hardened. And this has been one of the key issues that have polarized people across the world is Israel. So that by itself could be a sign of the times, because if there is a parallel between this story and the second coming, I think that could be happening, the hardening of the world's heart against Israel and the Jews. So, and it was told the king of Egypt that the people fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and of his servants was turned against the people. And they said, "Why have they done this, that they have let Israel go from serving us?" And he made ready his chariot and took his people with him. And he took 600 chosen chariots, and all the chariots of Egypt, and captains over every one of them. I should have highlighted all, because one thing that's referred to in the scriptures is that all nations would be gathered to battle against Israel. Oh gosh, I did that the same color. It's supposed to be yellow. I have other quotes that talk about the fact that it's not going to be every nation against Israel. There is going to be alliances, one for and one against Israel, but essentially, in one way or another, the whole world is going to be involved in this. But this is another little detail that you have Pharaoh and the Egyptians, which I would say represent the world and wicked forces, all the chariots of Egypt and captains over every one of them were enlisted in this pursuit. And it's interesting that it was 600, because time and time again in the scriptures, six is, well, maybe not time and time again, but at least in the book of Revelation, it makes it really clear that 6 is a bad number. 6 is the number of man, worldliness. It's less than perfection, because 7 is perfection. So I think that's interesting. Verse 8, and The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued after the children of Israel, and the children of Israel went out with an high hand. But the Egyptians pursued after them all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, and his horsemen, and his army, and overtook them encamping by the sea beside those two places. Verse 10, and when Pharaoh drew nigh, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them, and they were sore afraid. And the children of Israel cried unto the Lord. Pay attention to this, because there's a lesson here. There are those, I'm sure not all of Israel was necessarily like this, but you have those that were sore afraid. And look what they say. The ones that were fearful. Because you have people that are very fearful about the second coming and have a very bleak outlook on the second coming. And they said unto Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in the wilderness? So it's like, what? Were there no graves for us in Egypt? Is that why you brought us here? Because there's no graves there? Wherefore hast thou dealt thus with us, to carry us forth out of Egypt? Is not this the word that we did tell thee in Egypt, saying, let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. So you have people that are struggling with fear and, okay, this is the safer route. Let's just be worldly. Let's conform to the world. And let's just be in the bondage of sin, essentially. And they're complaining against the prophet who have brought them into, that have led them out into this situation. But 13, and Moses said unto the people, fear ye not. Interesting, because that's what modern day prophets are saying. I have a whole row on my spreadsheet called quotes A through Z. The topic is the future is bright. And they continually say, President Nelson, President Oaks, others, fear not. Continuing, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show which he will show to you today. For the Egyptians whom ye have seen today, ye shall see them again no more forever. So if we're looking at this as a foreshadowing of the second coming, that's what's going to happen to the wicked, those that are living a telestial law. There's going to be the earth is going to be baptized in fire. It's going to be cleansed by fire. The wicked are going to be destroyed. And then we're going to enter into this 1,000-year period where there are no wicked, at least not of the telestial type, for 1,000 years. And then there's going to be a small period after the 1,000 years where there's wickedness again. But then after that, the earth is going to be celestialized, and there definitely won't be any more wickedness on the earth. Verse 14, the Lord shall fight for you. And it's in all caps. So Jehovah shall fight for you. And that's what we're informed of in other scriptures, that it's going to be Christ that defeats the enemies of the Jews as Israel is being invaded, as Jerusalem is under siege. It's going to be Christ that will fight for them, just like here, just like the story of Moses and the Israelites in the Red Sea. The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. And the Lord said unto Moses, wherefore criest thou unto me? Speak unto the children of Israel that they go forward. But lift thou up thy rod, and stretch out thine hand over the sea, and divide it. Now remember when I said in Zechariah 14, pay attention to this, and his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives? This is another opposite. So the body part that's referred to with the second coming is the feet of Christ, his feet. But in the Red Sea story, it's Moses in his hand. And of course, Moses is a type. He himself is a foreshadowing of Christ. So you have the opposites of land being divided and water being divided. And then after the land is divided, water appears. After the water is divided, land appears. And then you have this opposite as well, the hand and foot. It's so interesting. Stretch out thine hand over the sea and divide it, and the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And I, behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they shall follow them, and I will get me honor upon Pharaoh and upon all his host, upon his chariots and upon his horsemen. And the Egyptians, or at the time of the second coming, the world and those that remain, as well as those that are destroyed, because they're definitely going to understand at that point. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, or Jehovah, when I have gotten me honor upon Pharaoh, upon his chariots, and upon his horsemen. And the angel of God, which went before the camp of Israel, removed and went behind them, and the pillar of the cloud went before their face and stood behind them. And it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel, and it was a cloud and darkness to them, but it gave light by night to these, so that one came not near the other all the night. It's interesting that you have this imagery of a pillar. Later on, it talks about a pillar of fire. If I haven't already forgotten, I think it talks about a pillar of fire. But it makes me think of this. I don't know if this is exactly what it's going to look like when Christ comes to the Jews on the Mount of Olives, but this is from the Book of Mormon video series, and it's when Christ came to the Nephites. And he comes down in this shaft of light that looks like a pillar of light. That's how he comes down. So I think that's interesting too. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind. That's another interesting detail, a strong east wind, because when Christ comes at the second coming, there's going to be the sign of the Son of Man. And in my opinion, based on the wording of all the quotes that we've read, it seems like the sign of the Son of Man is the Son of Man. That's how it reads when you read one of the Joseph Smith quotes. It seems like it's Christ coming in the clouds of heaven with all the hosts of heaven. And it comes from the east, and it starts out small at its first appearance, but it grows larger and larger until it's all ablaze. But one of the main features of the sign of the Son of Man is that it comes from the east. So in this case, the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. One thing I want to point out here before I forget, I don't know if this is related, but if we go to Doctrine and Covenants, section 61, this is the section that has to do with the destroyer that rides upon the waters. This is when Joseph Smith, I think this is when he was returning from his trip to Missouri. August 12th, 1831, Missouri River. And there's a very curious part to this. There's a couple verses. In verse 14, it says, "Behold, I, the Lord, in the beginning bless the waters, but in the last days, by the mouth of my servant John, I have cursed the waters." And then in verse 17, "And as I, the Lord, in the beginning cursed the land, even so, in the last days have I blessed it, in its time, for the use of my saints, that they may partake the fatness thereof." It also makes me think of, and I didn't pull up this scripture, but the whole concept of the first being last and the last being first. When Christ came the first time, the gospel went primarily to the Jews, and after a certain period of time, once that phase was over, then it went to the Gentiles. But in the last days, it's reverse. So I feel like it's related. You have this like switching of things, going one way to the other way, opposites. If you want to know more about this, I would advise clicking on the footnotes, because then it pulls up scriptures to let you know what this is referring to, blessing the waters and cursing the waters. With cursing the waters, it just takes you to the book of Revelation, where I don't know why it's not pulling up. Probably have to refresh this, but it basically takes you to the part where it talks about the angel pouring out a vial on the waters and whatever. In the book of Revelation, it talks about the sea and all the waters being poisoned and stuff like that, and wormwood and stuff like that. Okay, back to the Red Sea account. Verse 22. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. Now, I'm going to admit something. I've said before, I think that I thought that this event would probably look very natural. Like, it may not have looked the way that we picture it in our minds, but it does say that there's a wall of water, and I failed to remember that. So maybe it did look pretty cinematic in the way that it's depicted, and maybe it did look like this right here. But who knows? Even though there's a wall of water, maybe somehow in a way that I can't conceive right now, maybe it was more natural looking. But anyway, a wall unto them. And that's what it's going to be, I assume, when they're running through the chasm formed by the dividing of the Mount of Olives. I try to get the AI to do a better job on this, make the chasm deeper, but it's finicky. You can't always get exactly what you want. And normally these days, I wouldn't do any depictions, like any AI depictions of Christ. I feel like it's appropriate in this case, just because it's respectful. I feel like it's more, it's dignified. It's nothing crazy is going on here. Well, except for this part right here. But just visually, the walls of water and then the walls of rock. It feels like the same type of thing. It's one is a foreshadowing of the other. Okay, verse 23, and the Egyptians pursued and went in after them to the midst of the sea, even all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And it came to pass that in the morning watch, that's another interesting detail, because we're about to enter into this new day. When we think of 1,000-year periods, we know that in the Lord's time, 1,000 years here on earth is a day where he's at. And we often refer to the millennial day because we're entering into the 7,000 years. And so these things that we're expecting with the second coming, it happens in the morning of the millennium, at the beginning of the day. And it came to pass that in the morning watch, the Lord looked unto the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and of the cloud, and troubled the host of the Egyptians, and took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them heavily. That's a really interesting thing. I don't know what it's going to look like when Christ defeats the enemies of Israel, but I could easily imagine equipment malfunctions, things not working, and then ultimately those that are wicked. I don't know that every single person in those armies is going to be wicked and telestial, but ultimately the wicked that are living in telestial law will be destroyed with the rest of the wicked across the entire world. Okay, so, and took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them heavily, so that the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fighteth for them against the Egyptians. And think about it at the time of the second coming. Jehovah, Christ, fighting for Israel, and the whole world seeing it. Verse 26, and the Lord said unto Moses, stretch out thine hand over the sea, that the waters may come again upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen. And Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to his strength when the morning appeared. So I guess this is a little bit more on the nose, because before it said in the morning watch. So I guess it could potentially still be dark, and there's not daylight yet. But here it says, when the morning appeared, that's when this happened. And the Egyptians fled against it, and the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. And the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, and all the hosts of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. So just like at the second coming, I guess all those that are fighting against Israel, all of them, the ones that are fighting against Israel, are going to be destroyed. There remained not so much as one of them. But the children of Israel walked upon dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall unto them on the right hand and on the left. And thus the Lord, or Jehovah, and thus Christ saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore, and Israel saw that great work which the Lord did upon the Egyptians, and the people feared the Lord. Okay, the people feared Christ and believed the Christ and his servant Moses. So you see how it's a pretty fitting foreshadowing of the event of the Mount of Olives being cleaved in twain. I think that it's intentional. I think that's exactly what this story is supposed to be, because you think about these Jews after this happens. I mean, the experience itself is going to have a converting effect on them, I think. It's going to be very spiritual, being saved in such a miraculous manner. But they're going to look back, I think, to the story of Moses parting the Red Sea. And it's going to help connect the idea that Moses was supposed to be a foreshadowing of Jesus Christ, because that's who they currently reject. They don't believe that Jesus Christ is the Messiah. But they're going to see this parallel and be like, oh my gosh, this whole time, every time that we celebrate Passover and we think back to Moses taking us out of Egypt, or in other words, taking us out of the world from worldliness and sin and saving us, this whole time, this is pointing to Christ. And here he is. He's doing it himself this time. It's going to be amazing. It's just simply going to be amazing, you guys. I think I had just one last thing. If you go to the Institute student manual, it says, what was the purpose of the pillar? What was the purpose of the pillar of cloud and fire? The pillar of cloud and fire was a symbol of Jehovah's presence. It came between the Egyptians and the Israelites at the Red Sea. It was a source of light and protection for the Israelites, but a cloud and a darkness to the Egyptians. So I like that. But then there was this down here. What was symbolic about Israel's crossing of the Red Sea? The Apostle Paul taught that the Israelites' passage through the Red Sea, along with the pillar of cloud and fire that overshadowed them, symbolized baptism by water and fire. By passing through the Red Sea, the Israelites left behind their lives of slavery in Egypt and began a new life as the Lord's covenant people. And that's very fitting with this whole idea, because when Christ comes, there's going to be this mass conversion event where the Jews finally accept Christ as the Messiah and their God, and they're going to be baptized literally. They're going to be baptized literally. It's going to be the baptism and the reception of the Holy Ghost for the entire Jewish nation when this happens. So that's also perfect. So again, this right here, symbolic of a baptism, and this right here, also symbolic of a baptism, and actually leading to baptisms and the laying on of hands for the gift of the Holy Ghost. And then not only that, but the entire world is going to be baptized with fire. It's a parallel with the flood of Noah. That was the earth's baptism, and then it's going to be baptized with fire when Christ comes. It's a new beginning. Okay, and then I think there was one more thing. I'm actually going to skip that because the video is going longer than I thought it was going to. But I would definitely take this seriously. I know that it's been a couple years now. Like we're at I'm recording this on the 12th, and this happened on February 15th of 2023. So we're almost exactly at 3 years since this happened. So I know that's a lot of time, but I don't think it takes away from the sign that I think that this is meant to be. I'm not saying that you have to accept this as a sign, but I feel like it's pretty obvious. It's not every day that you have mounts of olives being cleaved in twain by earthquakes, and so close to Israel. So I would take it seriously. But that's going to be it for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.